So I'm going to start with a traditional Buddhist chant of Namo Tassa. And if you know it and you feel like joining, you're welcome to join together with me after the first time. And if you don't know it but you pick it up as we go along, you're also welcome to join. If you don't know it and you'd like to just hum along, that's fine too. Or you're also welcome to just fold your palms in front of your heart and just feel the sense of the meaning of it. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhaং Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I like to start with this chant because actually it gives me a feeling of a kind of depth of love passing through all of time and space, all kinds of situations, all kinds of occurrences from ancient times through the ages up till this time now. Now, Tina very kindly introduced me as a world traveler. I kind of more like to think of myself as a global wanderer or something like this, a citizen of this planet. And the last 4 months I've been very happily homeless. And the day after tomorrow, at long last, although also it seems kind of timeless, I'll be returning to Northern California, to the Sonoma Coast, north of San Francisco, to the Awakening Forest, Aranya Bodhi Hermitage, acres of rescued and regrowing redwood forest, pervaded by loving kindness and thoughts of generosity for our humanity, to offer back 400 acres of redwood forest and carbon sequestration, breath, the offering of the breath of life back to our world. So I think of all of those who've supported that being so, that offering being so, some who are here, some whose faces I recognize, who've been a part of that, and are also global wanderers like myself. So my loving kindness and thanks to all of them. Right now I'm aware that I have this opportunity to be speaking here tonight, not only because of Tina's kind invitation, but because of a little delay in my schedule to return. Already my monastic community of bhikkhunis, women fully ordained in this Buddhist monastic path, seminaries, novices, anagarikas, those gone forth, those who are aspirants, those who are friends of our monastic community or just love to be in the monastery together, they've all, at our hermitage and monastery, all entered into retreat now, already now from about a month ago. So I can actually feel, even though I'm far away, because of my love and care for them and my sense of attunement and my connection with the land of our hermitage, I can actually feel now, a month into their retreat, how their practice is starting to go deep. And even though I'm far away and haven't joined them yet, naturally in the last days I found myself also wanting to really quiet and start to go deep. I'll be able to join for the last 2 weeks of the retreat. So, all things being impermanent, we don't know what will really happen, do we? We don't actually know. You know, there's this plan in place. We don't even know how things are going to come out with this talk this evening, or what will happen afterwards. We have all these imaginations of what we think is going to happen, but if we really open our Dharma eye of understanding, then we realize we actually don't know. The thing we know is that we're here now. We're here in this space. We're present, sitting here together. Those of us who are not blind, we can see. Those of us who are not deaf, we can hear. We can touch. We can feel. We're all here together. Now, I'm mindful in the story of the Buddha's life, which I've spent some time studying with much interest, and studying about the students, disciples of the Buddha, those women and those men who were inspired by his awakened presence and teaching, way of being in the world, and then also wish to explore and to follow that path for themselves. I'm aware that according to the stories, the vast majority of them had awakening experiences or realizations, deep shifts in their life, in their karmic continuums, while listening to the Dhamma. We think that it happened while they were meditating, right? And I'm sure that their meditation played a very important part in it. And occasionally there are stories of people having awakening experiences while meditating. Of course, the Buddha taught meditation. The meditation is very, very important. It's 1/3 of the threefold training in sila, in moral virtue, ethical integrity. Yes, then the training in meditation then is next. Or in the higher mind, it's also called cultivating and developing the higher mind, because it's using faculties of mind that the Buddha gave really a lot of attention and care to, and considered to be amongst our higher abilities or higher faculties as human beings. There are so many different ways that we can apply our minds, and the way that we apply our minds also develops our minds, especially what we do consciously and intentionally with our mind, not to mention what we do unintentionally. All these things, like us being like a flowing river or a stream, then you see if you put your fingers into the stream, or you put your foot inside, then you see there's an effect that has a ripple effect that then, goes all the way down the stream from that action, flowing out in real time. We can see how that happens. The Buddha compared our minds and our actions, what we do with our minds, to be like that. That is, they're the effects, both immediately and then over the short run, and then also over the long run, as you can see with this kind of example. Yes. And the third part of the training in wisdom. Now, I remember as a teenager, at that time I thought as a young adult. Now I would say as a young girl, because I'm nearly 50. Even my Chinese age is already 50, so this year, yeah. So I entered into monastic life as a teenager. Now I've been in monastic life for nearly 30 years and have been a bhikkhuni now 20 pansa, 20 vasas as a bhikkhuni. Yes, so not so old, not so young. I feel like this is the happy medium time. This is the golden middle time. And although the body is breaking down a little more and a little more, I actually feel many thanks to this path, many thanks to this practice, that rather than feeling bad about getting older, in Buddhism with this teaching, I actually feel really good about the time, and really good to see the effects that have come and that are coming from the way that I've invested my time during these last years. And I actually really, really appreciate this, because that was one of my goals. When I was a teenager, I looked around at the other people, especially the other middle-aged and elderly people, and thinking about living in a valuable way was very important to me. As a teenager, I saw many middle-aged people having a kind of a waking up when they were about the age that I am now, or somewhere between 30 and 70, having a kind of a waking up and then checking and seeing whether the way that they were living their life, whether it seemed to be really valuable to them or not. And with that awakening, that kind of waking up and that kind of questioning, there were quite a lot of people around me in their middle age who actually did not feel that the way that they were living was really so valuable or so worthy, or really so much in touch with their ideals or their own sense of, like, their deep own private personal sense of ethical integrity and of virtue. And, seeing the people contemplating in this kind of way and hearing some of them talking to each other about it, this was very profound to me. And I know for some of them, then they started to have that awakening, but then, they were already so far away from their sense of ethical integrity, their sense of virtue, their sense of meaning, that it seemed like that flow of the river of their life was already too far gone. And they didn't feel able to somehow make a stand, to stop, to look into the things and see how to do them differently. And I experienced in those people then a sense of the corruption of the heart. Even they would normally be called good people. Like they had a good education, or they have good jobs, they have a good family, they've had kids, they've done the things that they're supposed to do to be okay, and yet something in the heart becoming deadened by the way that they were living day after day, not giving time and care and attention to the things that they felt to be of real meaning, real value. So that sense of the life in life, or of the beauty, the virtue, what is sweet and clear and wonderful and excellent, ennobling and inspiring in life, that part got suffocated and deadened and trampled on and stuffed away time by time, until it was so stuffed away that it wasn't even really accessible. And then a kind of a inner despair and a hopelessness, a strange anxiety, a strange inner depression was there, even as they tried to keep the show of their life, keep the form of their life, like everything was okay, but actually inside the feeling of meaningfulness is gone. It's been lost, it's gone rotten. I felt this is a very profound thing. This is something very sorry. This is something very meaningful for me to attend to. So, not knowing how long my life would be, I saw then at that time someone who I had been somewhat close to, not very close to, but somewhat close to. Then also, like I'm just recovering from a cold. So I still have a little bit of something from that cold. I caught it in Sri Lanka and it lasted about a month. Well, here, this person just a little bit older than me, that time caught a cold and then dead within 2 weeks. Amazing, amazing. Just a little bit older than me. I was just a teenager, yeah? And I thought, at that time I had the idea that like I would finish school, and then there's my work, and then there's family, and then there's this and that, and all the things of the yearly cycle, like there's always another holiday coming, and there's always something to be doing like this, that sometime in the future I would give time to exploring what I sense somehow inside myself was of real deep meaning and value, maybe sometime in the future. And many of my fellow students and those who are my age, who are my workmates, also, thought kind of similarly like that, because we're just going on in the ordinary flow. But as I looked at those 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years older than me, then there's a kind of a question about whether one can necessarily really do that in the future. And if the flow of one's life has gone too far, then seeing it may be hard to recapture. It may take some real work. I did see some people, though, who were doing that work. One of the wonderful things, actually, then about my leaving home, becoming an anagarika, and traveling to Asia, was then seeing a very different concept in Buddhism of elder life. Now, in the United States, to come to middle age and to get older is in a way a kind of embarrassment and a kind of failure. It seems very strange. Everybody who lives long enough gets older. How could it be a failure? And yet somehow aging and dying was considered a failure in a way. Like you haven't really done what you're supposed to do with life, right? And I look at these things now and I really chuckle about them, but the ideas are actually so strong, that it's an embarrassment to get older and that you're failing as a human being somehow if you can't continue to look 20 for the rest of your life, right? Especially if you're female, not to mention if you're male or anything in between. So, I don't know that anyone was exempted from it. And really funny ideas, but kind of running in the mainstream very, very strongly. And here I'm talking about the stream of ideas again and taking a look at that, yeah? But I went to Asia, and then with Buddhism in Asia, I saw actually a very different concept of aging was present in different ways. One, the idea that with getting older, there's the opportunity to get wiser, and that many of the people had gotten older and gotten wiser, and that there was something really good and really valuable and precious in that. That's highly revered. And it was so interesting to me. I thought it was highly revered whether you're qualified or not. Kind of like the opposite of the American concept of the time, which was kind of like if you get older, you're damned whether you do well or not. Because it's just because you got older, and just because of that. So it's almost the reverse concept, yeah? But I thought, of course, with my American skeptical mind, if you've gotten older and haven't really gotten wise, if you haven't really used the time well, and if you're not really displaying the excellent qualities of having gotten older and having gotten wiser, then I don't think they're deserving of my respect if they're not really wise. But I saw so many people actually who seemed like they were wise and had gotten wise in various ways. But the context was so good for that because it was expected. it was expected of you that if you lived long enough, you should be getting wiser. It's kind of like the reverse expectation. That is, if you live long enough, you're going to get uglier and all your faculties are going to decay. Right? The things may be true in a way, yeah, but it's a different kind of expectation and perspective there. And so I was very happy then to see people who were getting older and really did seem to be wiser, and those who got older and also seemed to really grow in love, grow in kindness, grow in compassion, grow in understanding of our humanity and the cycles of human life, especially grandparents' age, which is where you're really getting into trouble if you're an American. Then you've got wrinkles and your hair has turned white and gray and all this kind of thing. But especially the grandparents' age, this kind of golden ripeness and maturity and like able to love in ways that somehow they couldn't when they were younger. Seeing the grandparents love many times, oh dear, my goodness, and like how free the grandparents felt sometimes then to love, because they weren't quite as close as the parents were, and so it's like not with quite all the, not with the bondage of all the same expectations. So actually I saw this in the US too, and sometimes people would say that's why they love to be grandparents, is because now they can love freely. The parents have to do all the hard work and they have to take care of all the expectations, but now I can just see them and love them. And just see them and be generous, and just see them and be kind, and no matter what, no matter how, this kind of thing. And I saw this with the grandparents then, actually in US, but also very much in Asia as well. But the other thing that I saw in Asia, in Buddhism, that I completely didn't see in the United States, completely not, was the idea that, okay, now that you've done your job of a young person of working hard on this and that, and now that you've done your job as a young person in having kids, or your job in all of this, now is the time that you have the blessing of the entire culture. If you wish to really deepen your spirituality, if you really wish to explore these wisdom teachings, if you wish to meditate deeply, if you wish to touch into what is of real deep meaning and value and virtue for yourself, now you have the blessings of the entire culture to do so. In a way, sometimes, now it might be changing a little bit, but not only condoned, but almost expected sometimes. Yeah? Like this is the time of life. It comes from the old Indian paradigm for you to be able to really give all that you've gained during your life, all that you've amassed, all that merit and virtue, to then be able to invest and apply it down deep in this time. Now, from the American concept, no way, your faculties are degenerating. You're not going to be able to do that. You're past your prime. And this kind of is just a different concept, yeah? But then I saw in Asia the elderly people with such keen minds. In Buddhism then, it's like the deep, clear, bright eyes and keen minds, and this kind of insight and wisdom and love and compassion passing through all kinds of things. From my American paradigm, that's impossible. You're old, your brain is rotten and gone. You probably have dementia, right? And yet, within the Asian Buddhist paradigm, at least 30 years ago, and 20 years ago, then this was very strong, and still it's there. Although with westernization and internationalization and some of the trends, please don't take all of the trends from the United States, maybe not even all the trends from Australia. It's very important that we also have what is it? That we have a discerning mind. We have a discerning mind. Developing the discerning mind, we have it. We go shopping and we try to pick the things that are best, right? According to what we think is best. There are so many brands to choose from. We try to decide which one is better. Yeah, or, when we choose, we think about what is the weather today and then choose which clothes to wear. Then, we try to choose which ones are going to be well matching. We use this skill in so many ways, but it's not something that we're either born with or we're not, or that we have just a little or medium or somebody just has more. It's actually something within the Buddha's teaching that can really be cultivated and developed. Kind of like somebody goes to the gym and they don't have much muscle, and then they work with the weights and they grow the muscle. These qualities of mind and these qualities of heart that we're talking about here, also very much working with them, they grow and they develop. Even they were weak in us. We might have thought, I'm just a person who's weak in this. But with these teachings that are there, they can be grown and developed and even become strong, such that working with these teachings and practice over some period of time, then you step out of the gym, you step out of your car, you step out of your house, you step out of the Metta Center, and you've grown stronger in these excellent qualities, and the discernment part is one of them. And I want to particularly mention for discernment, to just be aware of our intention to take on and really take in what is good and bring what is good into our lives and bring up what is good in ourselves and to share that out. Sometimes the things, the way they come are, we say, a mixed bag, right? So it comes with lots of things in it. And if we took the analogy of the bag, then you'd open it up and you'd take out the things that were good or that were needed or that were useful for you, and you'd leave the others. You wouldn't carry that whole bag with you. Why carry that other stuff? Why take it? Why even pick it up if it's something that's not needed, not helpful? If we don't have discernment, though, we just take it all. And then those things can become, really like taking in and taking on something that's not helpful, that's burdensome, even that can be heavy, can be a weight on us. And sometimes can make the things that are good even unclear just by their association, like packed in together with so many things that are not so good, yeah? So very important to develop this discernment at whatever age we are, because even if we've come to middle age or elder age, then still that clarification, that discernment process is one that we can apply our minds to. And as the discernment grows and we see more clearly, then our lives tend to get lighter. There's an unburdening because of putting down and letting go so many of the things that are really not necessary, not helpful, not needed, that we don't actually have to take on. And then the things that remain also. It feels so good when you know that what you are carrying, what you do have, is really of value, is really of support, is really meeting the need, is really worthy. When people have that, then they have a wonderful kind of trust and confidence and even energy comes with that because of knowing that you've got something good that really does match up well with what's needed, with what we ourselves feel and know to be important and of meaning. Yeah. So I've just done a jump through Sila, Samadhi, and Panya here in some of the aspects that are there. But I appreciate what I encountered long ago then, or a few decades ago, in coming to Asia and then seeing some different things in Buddhism that I hadn't seen in my context growing up that seemed to be really eye-opening, mind-opening, heart-opening, of great meaning and value. Yes? Now, I'm going to just take a look at what I was asked to talk about this evening. You could say now, okay, talk over. Worldly relationships between people, partners, friends, family, colleagues may be fraught with challenges, attachments, desire, and expectations. Yes, certainly. Maybe or may not. That's our option. Yes. Drawing on examples from the Buddhist life and disciples, this talk will explore a different kind of relationship based on spiritual friendship and great love that transcends the worldly entanglements that often cause rifts in our relationships with others. Interesting. Now, I saw that just shortly before my arrival, Ajahn Brahm was here in Sydney too. Did any of you go to see him and his talk? Yeah? I saw that he was giving a talk on the DNA of unconditional love. I don't know what he talked about for this, but sounds kind of interesting. At the Sydney Olympic Park Sports Centre in the Hall of Legends, I thought this is a good spot for Ajahn Brahm because by now he's practically become a living legend, at least for us in the United States, A few years ago, I think in the year 2008 or 2009, then I was in the United States in the San Francisco Bay Area at a place called the Bodhi House, and for us in the United States we don't see Ajahn Brahm so often, and so one day in the Bodhi House then the phone rang, and then the person there who answered the phone said, came out and was looking very excited and said, Ayya T, which I'm called for short. Tathaloka is my ordained name, but people sometimes call me Ayya T for short. It's Ayya T, Ajahn Brahm is on the phone for you. She looked so excited and so happy and amazed. Actually, this is part of Ajahn Brahm becoming a legend. Then Ajahn Brahm wanted to ask me to come to Australia for a bhikkhuni ordination, the first Theravada bhikkhuni ordination in Australia. He was calling to invite for that, and sure enough, not so long after that, thinking about the things that are of meaning, the things that are of value, love and kindness in Buddhism, opening up the way for everyone, no closed door, all these kinds of wonderful thoughts like that. Then I got on the long flight to come to Australia, and then Ayya Nirodha, who is here with us here on the left, and our very own Ayya Nirodha, now Ayya Nirodha of Santi Forest Monastery in the Southern Highlands in Bandanoon, just outside of Sydney. And then Ayya Nirodha was one of the first women who is so wonderfully courageous and brave. After how many years in monastic life? 9 years. After 9 years in monastic life, me too, is after 9 years in monastic life that I had my own bhikkhuni ordination, and then for her too. So I was the first Western woman in contemporary times to be appointed preceptor for women's ordination in Theravada Buddhism. So part of Ajahn Brahm's making of his legendary status. And I don't know, I don't think I plan on becoming a legend. So But I'm not sure what Ajahn Brahm talked about in this talk, but it seemed really nice to me to, after his talk on unconditional love, to be talking about transcendental love. But I'm interested, transcendental love, I was thinking about what does this mean? Unconditional and transcendental love, are they the same thing? Unconditional, I think, means without condition. Transcendental, I think about like being able to pass through everything. For some people, they would say that transcendental love means like love that's out of this world. Yeah. Like maybe you could only experience after death when you go to heaven, or if you have an out-of-body experience, or something like that. I know some people, when they talk about transcendental love, they mean that kind of thing. But from spending these last decades with the Buddha's teaching and practice, I think about transcendental love quite differently than that. I think about it as the kind of love that is very much accessible to us in these bodies, with human bodies like these, and feelings like we have, and minds like we have, hearts like we have. That this is something that's very much like that is able to be grounded in everything, rest in everything, hold everything, pass through absolutely everything. This is my understanding of both the unconditional and the transcendental love in the Buddha's teaching. Yes, so I wanted to mention about that part because of that being a little bit different than some other ideas or some other concepts of transcendental love that may exist out in the world. Of course, for the Buddha's teaching, this kind of love that I was just talking about, this kind of love is also a very close companion, and often comes even like in the pack together with what we would call transcendental compassion. And then right next to it, that is the kind of compassion that also can be completely grounded in these bodies, these feelings, these hearts and minds, and that's able to, the kind of compassion that's able to touch upon absolutely everything, able to hold absolutely everything, able to pass through absolutely everything. And then in this pack, there's also right next to it mudita, metta, karuna, mudita. Mudita is not quite as easy to translate into English. Yeah. These days I'm preferring the translation of appreciation, and the aspect of appreciation, or appreciative joy. When I was younger, the English translations that we got were like sympathetic joy. What is sympathetic joy? It was hard for me to imagine. At least for American English, sympathy and joy normally don't go together. It's like sympathy would go with compassion, but joy, you would be a kind of a pervert if you're feeling joy when you're looking at someone who's suffering and your sympathy is there, and this would be very strange, yeah? But over time I've got a different sense of it, and we know if we look into our own qualities, natural qualities of heart in ourselves or in others, what these qualities are. When there is love, when there is deep, deep love, if you think about like a wonderful, deep love, like the kind of best kind of love, whether that might have been there with your own grandparents in their eyes, or the eyes of your parents, or with your own children at some time, or some people say when they held the tiny baby kitten or a tiny little puppy or baby human in their hands, then they felt this kind of such loving tenderness. And if that one that we felt such love for expressed any kind of pain and difficulty, then our hearts are like, oh, trembling, at that with care for their pain and difficulty. And if they smiled or wagged their tail or, picked a beautiful flower or whatever it is, then our hearts are also like, oh, sharing the joy with them. We know what that is because it's a quality of love. When real love, deep love, beautiful, natural human love is there, then it has these sides to it. For those who are parents, then maybe you might have experienced this with your children. The Buddha often mentioned the analogy of the mother's love for their only child, and even the word that's used is for the child who is their heir. Yes, so sometimes it's translated as son, but it's not quite correct because this word is used for son, but also is used, we find in the Buddhist texts, in the Pali, we find in the Sanskrit texts as well, that the same word is used for a daughter when the daughter is a legitimate heir of the family. So if you think about, if you have only one heir in the family, then the way that families think about how precious that child is who is the heir, and if they have only one, then this kind of sense there. So you might be feeling this comes with like strong attachment. This idea comes with strong attachment, but here's a place for the discernment, where the discernment can really work and can separate things out, because the attachment doesn't necessarily go together with that love. It's not inherent in that love. That attachment can come in and wrap around and become deeply entangled with that love, but not necessarily. It's not innate to the quality of the love itself. That love there, when it's functioning freely, when it's functioning naturally in the kinds of situations that I mentioned, it's not qualified by attachment. It's not qualified by expectations or demands, or the attachment often comes, it's like it rides on those types of things, that is, expectations and demands. Sometimes they're called needs, but if you look at it quite truly, if you look at it very honestly, sometimes what we call needs are actually expectations or demands. We may have learned that it's something that we think should happen or has to be like that or must be like that for things to be good, for things to be right, for things to be okay. All of these are kinds of concepts in our brains, or they're mental fabrications that are there. The Buddha called these fabrications sometimes like a great tangle or like a great thicket, as if you go into a thicket and then it's like, kind of blocked around on all sides with things that are binding and sticking with thorns on them and that kind of thing. But for those who learn mindfulness, for those who learn clear comprehension, even if you are in a mindfulness and clear comprehension test course run and you got put into the area where you come into a thicket, you could actually take each one of those lines of the thicket and mindfully avoid the thorn, and then take out each one of those lines, each one, until they're all just lying down there at your feet. And then you'll set down your clippers, and there you are, free. 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 Seeing what's there and being careful. You can do these things. Yeah? So actually that freedom is available, and these things are not necessarily physical things. They exist in our streams of thought or patterns of thought in our bodies and minds. These, we might think they're not real at all, they have no real existence, it's only a mental fabrication, right? But the neuroscientists, the neurobiologists will tell us that there is something even going on in the physical level of the body. That is, our thoughts, our ideas are making patterns of energy. They're like streams, they're like roads that are there. So there is something physical that's there, but when our thought changes, then that light, the life energy, that electricity that's there, then it moves in a different direction. It goes along a different course. Sometimes even with a kind of brilliant idea, then the whole system lights up, yeah? It's quite amazing. We can see how it happens even at the level of the body. So we had thought that's just mind, we just experienced that at the level of our feelings. And if we were paying attention, if we're mindful of the body, we might notice that we're actually feeling really good at the bodily level as well. But now the scientists are saying, look how this is happening on the bodily level, and then look how these things are so good for your health too. It's anti-inflammatory, it reduces pain, it improves your sleep, it even improves your job satisfaction and performance, right? All of these things are now known through science on the statistical level. So the things that the insight meditators would know, like gaining insight into in a way, the non-duality of body and mind, and we can see somehow at the scientific level now as well. If we pay attention to our experience, then we know the truth of that. We know how that works. And we even know the feeling of, as I was watching out here in this room when I was saying, like, taking down the entire tangle and the thicket and it's all lying at your feet, and I could see how some of you are like, huh, right? And then you're free, and then there's this kind of thing where so many shoulders kind of opened and dropped just a little bit, and so many bodies centered a little bit, and so many heads rebalanced, and this kind of, subtle shift that's there just at the thought. This is at the bodily level, but just at the thought of being free from such a tangle, such a thicket of, and being able to love freely, not bound with that love, not stifled, not suffocated, not tied and bound up by qualifications, expectations, attachments, and demands, which may or may not be in accordance with reality, which may or may not be in accordance with the truth of things. Now, if these things were all in accordance with reality, there would be no problem with them, right? There would be no trouble. What trouble would it be? These things wouldn't cause suffering. They wouldn't cause trouble between spouses. They wouldn't cause trouble between parents and their children. They wouldn't cause trouble between bosses and their employees. What trouble would they cause if these things were really in accordance with the truth of things, were in accordance with the reality? So here's another thing. Growing up in the United States as a young person, and a person who entered into monastic life, guess what? I was a strong idealist. Now, I'd say this kind of idealism is actually prevalent in the United States anyway, but someone who goes into monastic life, many times, I tell you, all the more so, in terms of being idealists. But now, being an idealist like this, am I going to get myself into trouble or not? Yes? Why? What's the criteria? If you're an idealist, what's the criteria for getting into trouble? Huh? Expectations? What kind of expectations? I'll answer my own question. False expectations, unreal expectations, impossible expectations. Those are the kind that you get into trouble with. I tell you from somebody who's looked a lot at this. I tell you from personal experience. I've gotten into all kinds of trouble from having false, unrealistic, impossible ideals and expectations. But I haven't stopped being an idealist. Rather, I've changed my idealism. I've redirected it. I've directed it towards what is considered in many religions and many faiths the highest ideal, the ideal of truth. Yeah? High ideal in Buddhism as well, right? But not only as an ideal. The Buddha taught about what is true as a reality. Not something transcendental in terms of being out of this world and unexperienceable as like with these bodies and feelings and hearts and minds. Not that, but really the truth of things as they actually are within our own experience, as able to be experienced by the human mind, by the human heart. Yes? So, this led me to a truth-based idealism, a reality-based idealism. Now, if we have reality-based expectations, are they going to lead to disappointment or not? Seems like kind of doubtful. There are a few shaking heads a little bit, like maybe not sure. Reality-based expectations. What would a reality-based expectation be? A reality-based expectation, actually we do find reality-based expectations in this path of practice. Even for if you've learned about meditation, what you've learned is actually based upon reality-based expectations. That is, if you do a particular thing, if you take up a particular mode of being or way of being, that it's going to have some effects, and those effects are going to be of benefit to you. And when testing it, the Buddha qualified his teaching as ehipassiko, which means come and see. Yeah, this is one of the things that I really liked about it as a young skeptical American. It's like I don't have to make my pledge of allegiance and belief beforehand, and then only after that the door is open and then I get the methods. The door was open and I got the methods and I get to try them out, and then the Buddha says if they work well for me, then I should trust in that, then I should believe in that, right? This is saddha. This is the rightly grounded faith or trust or confidence that's there in the way that the Buddha taught, according to what the Buddha taught in his recommendations for saddha, for trust, faith, confidence. So ehipassiko means come and see, and then to try for yourself, and then look at the effect. So this is actually reality-based expectations are grounded in cause and effect, or conditional causation. So conditional causation is sometimes taught in Buddhism as like the most deep and profound Dhamma. Paticca samuppada. What does it mean? It's a Pali word that's hard to pronounce and has a lot of letters, and deep and profound Dhamma. If you have a Dhamma course, then Paticca samuppada will probably be like you have to go quite a ways through your Dhamma course to come to cause and effect. Or conditional causation. Properly, it's conditional causation. So just understanding that things happen according to conditions, and also things don't happen if the conditions are absent or the conditions are not all in place. So the Buddha even mentioned as a very kind of high statement. We think the triple gem and the Dhamma jewel, the Dhamma gem is there, is very high and wonderful. The Buddha even said on one occasion that if you see conditional causation, you see the Dhamma. And then even said, if you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha. And what does this mean? Doesn't look like a Buddha statue, or does it? Right? No. A very interesting kind of deep and profound saying and statement that's there. But conditional causation, it's there in the Four Noble Truths. Actually, Four Noble Truths is really, it's about this. I feel so sorry in the United States, and I met a young man one time. Our monastic community was renting a place for temporary lodgings for the monastic community while some renovations were going on at our hermitage. And there was the place that was rented, then there was the landlord and the landlord's son. The landlord's son came to look out for something, and the landlord's son looked at us in our robes and said, "Buddhist?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, I studied Buddhism in school." I said, "Oh, really? What did you learn?" He said, "I learned life is suffering." I said, "Oh, interesting, I've studied that in Pali and Sanskrit." But actually I would translate it a little bit differently, and I said, okay, so you learned, well, I would translate it, there is suffering in life, rather than life is suffering. To me, that makes quite a big difference. To someone for whom English is not their first language, it might seem like, what difference does that make? You're saying the same thing, right? Life is suffering, there is suffering in life. It has almost the exact same words, they're just in a little different order. But actually, for a native English speaker, it makes a big difference between if you say life is suffering or you say there is suffering in life. Big difference. There is suffering in life. Almost nobody would argue with you about. If they did argue with you about it, you might call them an unrealistic idealist. But life is suffering. That can have a very different impact for people. I asked him, yeah, that's close to the first of the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught. Did you learn anything else? And he said, 4 Noble Truths? And I said, yeah, 4. And it means number 2, number 3, and number 4, right? And he looks at me like I'm talking to him like an idiot. I'm sorry, but really, the Buddha taught 4. And you remembered 1. Do you remember any others? He said, nope, that's all I remembered. I heard that and I didn't need to hear any more. Right? And then I felt so sorry because he heard the Four Noble Truths expressed in a way that closed his mind, did not accord well with his experience, and then he didn't even pay attention to. I hope in his class number 2, number 3, and number 4 were taught, but sometimes they're not. This is a real downer. We call this a real bummer in my, yeah, what good is there in that, right? But if you look then at number 2, number 3, and number 4, then you see causation. You start to look at causation, and then causation and also cessation. And then number 4, you look at there being a path for working with that. That is a path for cessation of, that's reducing, easing, alleviating, and eliminating suffering, that the Buddha called the second arrow suffering. That is the suffering that may or may not be there. Like I showed you the entanglement before, right? And it's like this part, the entanglement part, may or may not be there, right? Not necessarily. That first statement is not a kind of a damning statement that says it's like necessarily always like that. Not. The entire Buddhist teaching. At one time the Buddha was asked to give a very brief summary of his teaching, even in less than 4 parts. And then he narrowed it down to what he said was one. Now, I'll check with you afterwards because I'm not so sure about my math. To me, my counting may be a little bit different. But he said he narrowed it down to just one thing. That is suffering and the end of suffering. How many do you count? Anyway, that's semantics, right? We don't need to argue about whether one or two. Lots of other people in religion will be arguing over whether there's one or two, but in this case we don't need to. We can be clear and free of that. But the Buddha mentions suffering, and just suffering and the end of suffering as a way of simplifying that even further. And I really appreciate that. This is then talking about the unrealistic and false ideals and expectations play a very, very important role in this, I've found, over time. Because one, as ideals, they have the tendency to occupy our minds and also to blind us. But in their absence, when they're not there, we can see more clearly. And our mind and our mental energy becomes available for those things I was talking about that the Buddha called the higher things that human beings can do with their minds, which is very wonderful. Yeah? Did I say a number one and a number two? Uh-oh. Well, for now there's only number one. Very valuable, very valuable. Conditional causation. Coming back to this again, to look into it a little bit more clearly. If the causes are there for something, in this case the subject is suffering. If the causes are there for something, it will exist. If those causes, these are conditional causes, conditions. If those conditions cease to exist, the effect, and here the subject is suffering, the effect will also cease to exist. So this is very, actually I think about it as being very scientific, very practical, very normal, very understandable. And yet, in the early Buddhist teaching, this is considered to be the very crux, the very heart of the Dhamma, the very heart of the teaching, because people had all different kinds of beliefs and ideas about the way that things happened, and a lot of doubt and confusion even about that. So this was a hallmark of the early teaching. So for example, if we were to come back to love again, and if we were to look at like as conditions, love, and then add in attachments, then we have love mixed with attachments. And those attachments can be of various kinds, but then if we take the attachments part out, then we're just left with the love part. Now, I had been talking about this package, the love coming together with compassion and also together with appreciation. So even during the meditation earlier on, then I tried to mention each of these three. It's actually a 4-pack though. If anyone's been next door, then they would see on the rooms in the office next door at Metta Law, then they would see the rooms are labeled with these 4. And the 4th quality is also for those who have loved deeply, and also one that they may have come to know in their own experience. In fact, if we go back to the example of the mom with her only child, or if you've been a dad with that only child, or if you've been an elder brother or sister, or babysitter, friend with that only child before, then also you might know something about this. So you may know about the love, and you may know about the compassion. That is the trembling of the heart with any pain, the gladness of the heart with any joy that's there. But then also these things, like you can feel almost, if you think about it, like how the heart could be yanked back and forth, or it's like going with the joy and then going with the sorrow and this kind of thing. But if you stay with that child for a little while, either you have to find some steadiness of mind, or you have to go crazy. Because with that child, the things that are causing tears and the things that are causing giggles and laughter are going to be alternating minute by minute. In a 24-hour period, there can be hundreds, if not thousands, of such occasions. And if your heart is going to be moved like too much, without the sense of steadiness to it, without that sense of like knowing that then the knowing that then passes through things, that is often considered to be a quality of deep love. Yeah? That is that quality to be able to pass through many things. That ability to pass through thick and thin. That ability to pass through the joys and the sorrows, the pleasures and the pains, to be able to pass through all of that. Then we understand this to be the qualities of deep, deep love. We hope, we expect for it from our parents. We wish they may or may not be able to do it, but we wish from them that they'll love us no matter what. Whether the tears are streaming down our faces and we got in trouble and difficulty, or whether something wonderful has happened and we're uplifted and in joy, no matter how many times our mood changes, no matter how many good and bad things happen to us, we think that they will be happy for us in our joys, and they will have compassion for us in our sorrows and pains, because we have a sense inside ourselves of this quality of love that passes through everything. And this is the upekkha. This is the fourth in the pack of four. This is the fourth factor, but it's like the balancing factor, and it's like the factor that makes that, or is able to make that unconditional, like that quality of unconditional love, or is able to transcend, that is not just sticking on this situation or this circumstance or that circumstance or this demand or that expectation or that kind of thing, but able to flow freely, able to pass through all of these things. So the upekkha quality, which could be called steadiness, it could be called balance, it could be called even called equipoise. Equipoise, I'm just kind of okay. Equanimity also, I think, kind of okay. But it's not that it just makes everything, not necessarily making everything equal in the way that we sometimes imagine. Allows everything to be as it is, but able to pass through everything. Also doesn't make everything a flat line, right? For human beings, if we look at the EKG, rising and falling, our heartbeats, our breath, this is the nature of things. Also, it appears, the sun rises, the sun sets, the seasons change, all of these things. It's not just to make everything the same or everything equal in that kind of way. But when we know the cycles of things, then our mind can be steady, our view can be steady in how it's able to pass through everything. I remember being a young child and not knowing the seasons properly when I was a little girl somehow. Some people said, "Oh, Ayya T, were you wise from when you were a little girl?" I might say, I'm not sure about being wise even now, let alone when I was a little girl. I think I did quite a lot of foolish things. I remember with my mom planting the garden the first time that I remember, and I was so excited. We tilled the soil and made the soil good in rows. We had seeds in these packages that had a colored picture of the tomato and the cucumber and the pepper and these kinds of things on the package. And then she showed how to open up the soil a little bit, put the seed inside, cover the soil very gently. She said, don't pound down the soil too much or it won't be able to grow well, but cover the soil gently, and then putting some water also gently, not to flood, but enough water. And then there was a little post and then the picture of the tomato on top, right? So then I'm pulling on my mom, we're done? When is there tomato? Right? And she said, first it has to grow. First we're going to be giving water. Every day we can give some water if it doesn't rain, and then also if any weeds grow up, then we're going to take out the weeds, and then it will grow. And then a couple of hours later I was back there, Mom, I want to see. Right? She was so kind with her loving kindness and her compassion. She allowed us to open it up and take a look at the seed inside again. You see, not yet. But then the next day, as soon as it's sunrise, I want to go out and see again, right? My dear Mom, bless her heart, she was willing to go out in the early morning while it was still cool and dew was on the ground to open up and look inside that pile of dirt one more time. And I tell you, we put compost in that dirt as well. So, natural compost, by the way. So, there's some smelly things there. But she was willing to come out one more time and open it up again. And then, by the second day I could see the seed is starting to crack open, and I could notice some difference that's there. And then I saw how it grew more and how it grew more. But then I want to know, when is it going to be tomato? So she tried to explain to me about the seasons, and asked me, okay, now you have to be patient. Many days are going to pass before this is going to be ready. I want to know how many days. But this is it's like a wonderful example of my mom, her own mind she is happy about it, but she's steady because she knew about the seasons. I didn't understand about the cycle of the seasons at that time, so I had doubt and I needed lots of explanation, and she had to teach me how to have a steady mind, to be able to be patient and to understand. To be patient and to understand with her loving kindness and compassion. Yes. And somehow I was able to get through day after day until the sprout actually showed its head, and until it started to grow up along the post, and until months later, tomato. First green, but then even red tomato came to be there and came to be ripe. So all of this is very much in accordance with conditional causation. If we understand about the causes, we understand about the conditions of all of these things, that is wisdom. That is a kind of wisdom, and that can be a great support. This is where the loving kindness part and the wisdom or the understanding part can then join together and support each other in the way that then our seeing, our knowing, our understanding, then the depth of our understanding growing, ripening, and maturing, not into tomato, but into wisdom, then comes to be the fruit of this. And it enables also that, like the wise ones, whether they're young or whether they're old or any age in between, the view that they have, what they know about the world and what they know about human life, yes, that's able to pass through all kinds of things, all the trials and tribulations, all the joys and all of the sorrows, everything else, even the quiet days, even the quiet days, even with love and appreciation for peace and quiet, yes, where that is the fruit that comes with this path, yes. So I'd like to take a little pause right here and just to acknowledge that I haven't been talking much about disciples of the Buddha. Other than us, if I were to include us and our life experiences, and I really don't exclude us. I don't. But I have written an article that some of you may have seen that does talk about some of these teachings in relationship to the life of the Buddha and the Buddha's disciples, even and especially the Buddha's own wife and the Buddha's own mother, even the Buddha's own child, even the Buddha's own brothers and sisters appear in these teachings. Yeah. So a free copy of this article is available on the web. Please ask Tina if you would like to know how to access it if you have interest in that. And I've just shared with you what I feel is actually really like very much of use and benefit for our hearts, for our lives, as we are, all of those of us who are here today, including myself. I've tried to share about this because who knows the future, but this time right now is very important and good to speak of what is practical and practicable, even its deep, actually deep Dhamma, the depths and the core of what the Buddha was teaching. So I'd like to give a couple of minutes now if you have any question or if you have anything you would like to share. Ha 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 ha. Not that I put you off so you're so shy and embarrassed. Yeah?
I'm just a little bit curious.
Huh.
When you were a teenager,
Yeah.
did your family or your friends try to stop you to come this path?
No, they didn't.
They didn't?
No.
They didn't try to stop you?
They didn't try to stop me, no. Some of them might have thought I was crazy, or some of them might have thought I was acting really radically. They might have questioned whether it was wise of me or not, but at that time I was like in the ancient Buddhist suttas, there's mention of those with their hair on fire, and I was a hair on fire kind of teenager at that time. So, I didn't mention, but that person who I was close to, maybe I did mention, and passed away within 2 weeks, caught cold, caught pneumonia, and died. Yeah. And seeing that, was really profound for me. Later on, when I learned more of the Buddha's story, the story of the Buddha seeing the 4 sights, or the 4 divine messengers, like seeing the sick person, seeing the aging person, seeing the dying person, and then seeing the recluse, the seeker. For me, that awareness of death, together with also then seeing monastics, and for me, actually seeing another Western female monastic was very important to me somehow. That activated in my mind a sense of possibility and potentiality for really being able to live as a seeker and fully dedicate my time to exploring and practicing this Dhamma. Now, my parents initially thought, as I was in university, they thought, okay, university, higher education in university, maybe another 4 to 8 years from where I was then, was their thought. So I initially made a bargain with my dad for 5 years for my higher education. This was to be higher education in higher ethics and morality, training in the higher mind in meditation, and higher training in wisdom, as taught in the Buddhist path. And so I got a 5-year agreement initially. And in that 5-year agreement, tell you what I did. I left the U.S. I went cold turkey on media. A big deal for me even at that time, even though we did not have smartphones. We did not have laptops yet then. But I went cold turkey on media. And I didn't come back to the U.S. I had minimal contact with my family, and I didn't come back to the U.S. for 5 years. Yeah, and so that was the period of time that was tentatively agreed on by my dad for my alternative higher education in this path. Yeah, so I came back after 5 years. And I remember sitting in the car with my dad, driving to our old house, then in Washington State, in northeastern Washington State. And then he was saying something like, okay, now it's been 5 years, you've learned a lot, now it's time for you to come out and benefit. Share what you learned with the world. But I explained to him, Dad, you know, in Buddhism, in Buddhist monastic life, I see a lot of people who've been in Buddhist monastic life for a longer time who are not just cloistered, but who are actually doing a lot to benefit people in the world. I don't believe that I necessarily have to leave monastic life for my life to be of benefit to the world. I don't see that I have to leave monastic life for me to be able to share some good from what I've learned. He said, oh, really? Not cloistered. I explained some places for some periods of time the monastics do go into deep retreat. For example, when I go back to the United States now, to the Hermitage, for the last 2 weeks of this retreat, I'll cut off all media, unless there's some kind of emergency, and I have personal retreat time as well, silent and secluded during that time. Not forever, but just to really, give that time to the benefit that there can be from temporarily having periods of time in silence, in seclusion, not engaged with so many different kinds of things. And then that benefit is there. I'm able to take that benefit myself into wherever I go, whatever I do. In fact, that's part of the training, really, is how to extend the benefit, not only for monastics, but for everyone. Really, this is part of the training. So the benefit that we got in the sitting meditation, how to bring that into other postures, how to bring that into other activities, how to extend that really as far as you can. Even one of my primary meditation teachers was really, really strong. Sometimes even seemed kind of grumpy about this part, but just very, would say, a stickler about this part. So I would go for the interview with him, he would say, "Where are you losing it? Tell me, where are you losing it?" "I'm not sure." It's hard to remember. Pay attention. I want to know where you're losing it. Okay, well, after lunch, then, getting up and going to my room and going to take a rest. I thought, just let it rest, right? Like this. And then he wanted to know, how many steps did you take to your room? Which way did you turn the door handle? What kind of door handle was? Was the handle warm or cool? It's like if your mindfulness and clear awareness is there at the time, then you may know that, then want to report back on that. When you fell asleep, were you breathing in or were you breathing out? I'm not sure. I was sleeping, right? I don't know. I don't really remember. And when you woke up, did you wake up on the in-breath or the out-breath? So I start to pay attention, but then you really know, like, how you're paying attention is ever so important, because otherwise you're going to really mess with your life cycle and biorhythm. Because if you start paying attention in a tense way or in a frantic way or in a kind of hypercritical way or that kind of thing, then that causes real trouble. You really have to, that quality with which you bring mindfulness to the body, that's like relaxation and awareness together, so it's not too tight, not too loose. That quality that you bring to the breath, so you're aware of it but not controlling it. These qualities, then you have to be able to bring these qualities to the other things. Otherwise, you just make a big mess, right? It's like not able to go to sleep, not able to... even asked about my toileting. So I was about to say, not able to go to sleep, not able to go to the toilet. Like, for your passing of your urine. It's there in the sutta, it's there in the text, like mindful while urinating, mindful while defecating. And what, really? That's there in the scripture? According to my ideas, like the Buddha can't say that. These unholy things, but for the practice, for the training of mindfulness and clear comprehension, it's like with the unconditional love, nothing exempt. Nothing exempt from it at all. Absolutely everything. The entire cycle, from the time that the food is before you, to it being in your hands, to going into your mouth, to chewing, to swallowing, to passing through the entire body, to coming out again. Cycle of nature is there, able to be mindful and aware of, the entire process that's there without having to say, that's unholy, and like this is an object of attachment, whereas that's an object of aversion. And yes, the mindfulness does show up those things at first, which is very, very good. But then also, like, what's it like to relate to it without the attachment? As I said, it doesn't mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you have no heart. Remember about this, yeah? Okay? So without the attachment, then, what's that like? And for this other part of the process, without the aversion, without the rejection, what's that like? Oh, this is what it's like when there's just mindfulness and clear awareness with this. Oh, how beautiful. Oh, how beautiful. Even that. Oh, how beautiful. Amazing, right? So I told my dad that I didn't necessarily think that I needed to leave the monastic life in order to be able to share the benefits from what I had learned. And I told him I had seen concrete examples of others in Buddhism who were definitely sharing lots of benefit with monastics and with non-monastics without having left monastic life. And I told him, this was at 5 years, I told him, it's just starting to get really good. It seems like it would really be a shame to leave now, because some of the things I'm working with, I'm just starting to really see, what there is in this. I'm just starting to really see what can be done with this. And it seems like it would be such a great shame to have to just stop and leave that behind. What do you think about a little while longer and a few more years, perhaps an indefinite period? And in fact, he was agreeable to that. He thought that I'd made my argument well enough. You know, as a forensic physicist, he had to go into the courts a lot and like argue with the legal aspects of the case and that kind of thing. So to make a good and well-reasoned argument with examples and case studies went far for him. So he said, as long as it seems like you're really growing from it, as long as it seems like you're really getting benefit from it. Yeah, and that was a wonderful permission. And so far now it's been a wonderful permission and a wonderful blessing, because it's been 30 years and I haven't yet come to the time where I felt like I'm no longer growing from it or no longer getting benefit from it. Yeah, I don't know for the mind of the Arahanta, the completely awakened one, whether they feel they're still growing and there's still more benefit for them or not. I'm not sure. Not there yet, but where I am at, I feel pretty happy with what there's been in it and the unfolding of the process, the unfolding of the path. Oh, is this my signal?
Oh, no.
Or do you have a question? Yes, please.
I ask about like the conditioning you were talking about. Like let's say, for example, on a practical level, let's say someone has gone to a doctor and they're waiting for results.
Test results.
Yeah.
Important test results.
Like medical
Yeah.
results. But in Asia, you would have seen like how a lot of people do, like Bodhi pujas and
Yes.
stuff like that. Maybe in the interim.
I've just visited Sri Lanka for the first time for the past 2 months, and so the thing that she's talking about, that she's alluding to, people going to do Bodhi puja, are actually amazingly, I was in Sri Lanka for 2 months and I didn't see any Bodhi puja. But it really depends upon where you go and what you do, yeah. But yes, I know people as the Buddha also said, people go to shrines, people go to holy places, people do all kinds of things to try to ease their hearts and minds, and also in the hopes that it will bring some blessing, some mangala, some kind of blessing and benefit for them that will help them. And I see for these kinds of things, sometimes going to the holy place really, it has a kind of an ambiance, an atmosphere combined with that person's faith that really does help them to calm down. It really does help them to see through the things. It's really evocative of their faith, their trust, their understanding. If traditionally they did something like then reading one of the Buddha's teachings while they were there, hopefully if they understand it also, then it's like some of the wisdom that's in there then helps them to understand, helps them to reconcile their mind, to contemplate on what they're experiencing in a way that eases their mind and helps them then to pass through absolutely everything. And these days in contemporary Sri Lanka, meditation has become quite popular and widely taught, and the teaching of the ancient suttas, the early Buddhist teachings, also in very common everyday language, very nicely explained. There's a big revival in sharing these teachings, so many more people have an idea about these. So they might like to go to sit underneath the Bodhi tree, reminded of the place where the Buddha had his own awakening, and feel wonderful to be in that like sacred spot together with others who are chanting and meditating and that kind of thing, and maybe contemplate what they've learned, maybe meditate, and these things will ease their heart. Another thing is when people's hearts are eased, when they do gain insight, when they do gain wisdom, this is one of the most precious things in life. You don't have to believe it. When people experience it, they know for themselves. This is precious, this is very important, this is very significant. And what naturally arises in their hearts then normally is gratitude and generosity. So with the opening of their heart, then gratitude is there, realignment of priorities is there with the clearing of their minds and their view, their perspective. Often then generosity, and they want to do something beautiful. They want to do something to share love and to share care with others. And if this has been connected to the Buddha's teaching, often there's gratitude towards the Buddha, or towards that teaching, or towards those who taught or shared that teaching, and the wish that be able also to be shared with others, because they knew the benefit themselves. Then they wish that, like if one was sick and got the medicine that they needed, then if they knew about others having that kind of sickness and they have the ability to share that medicine with them, then with deep gratitude and appreciation, then doing what they can to share that medicine with others. These kinds of feelings of gratitude and acts of gratitude and feelings, heart of generosity and acts of generosity, they arise very naturally and spontaneously when we have openings of mind, we see things clearly, we have some kind of realization, some kind of shift of view, some kind of insight, real insight. Yeah. So I did see when I visited the holy sites in Sri Lanka, the sacred city Anuradhapura and other places, I saw many co-pilgrims who were there, and so I did observe about this. Sometimes, though, as you know, people will think that because it's different. It's a different process, but it's like I'm waiting on my test results and think, if I give something, maybe it will make my test results good, right? This kind of thinking. And for that, is it really going to work or not like that? Maybe not. Not good to hinge one's entire hopes on that kind of method, I would say. Yeah. The others that I was talking about, those things, I think it's a much, in a way, much better gamble, because it's like working with things that are known to work. Working with conditions that are known to have particular kinds of good effect. Whereas the idea like, if I give something, my test result is going to be okay, is, there are a lot of different conditions that are at play there. You can't just say it's going to be like that. Yeah, it's dependent upon a lot of other things. Maybe if your heart is generous, that has benefit. Sometimes even being generous can be healing for people. Sometimes, truly, because real heart of generosity, I don't mean just the form of generosity, but the real heart of generosity, the way that the Buddha taught it, is one of release. It's one of opening the heart, which is the difference. It's different than the heart caving in on itself. It's different than the heart being bound up and constricted. Yeah. So it's a quality of the real heart of generosity, then having its blessing and its benefit there. It's not just the form, it's the heart.
in everyday life. So as a lay person, I practice, I do my meditation. But then, I mean, I've found over the years, yes, there's some benefits, there's like looseness and detachment and that. But over and over again, I'm thinking, I still get stuck. I'm still caught up in all of the, you know, there's competition out there, there's ambition, and, you know, there's just all of the stuff that life has. And yet, you know, even though I'm trying to maintain a you know, regular meditation practice, and I'm just wondering, like, how, especially as a layperson, how do you reconcile, like, because in a monastic life, I think the ideal conditions are kind of there for more. That's what I see from the outside. I don't know, you know, none, but so I'm just trying to get to, you know, how do you reconcile, like, living in the dynamics of a lay life?
Well, I tell you, in the monastic life, we still have to do our work. We do. Somebody else is not going to do it for us. And, you know, going into what are like the ideal conditions, that will have its benefit for a period of time, but then your habits of mind will come up, and they'll start to come up more and more. It's like people getting married and like being really nice to each other for some period of time. They're able to conceal some things, or they're suppressed by the different situation, and then the stuff starts to come out, right? Over time. And being in monastic life is very much like that, yeah? So this is not a bad thing, actually, but it just means that just the environment's not going to take care of everything for you. It can be a big support, it can be a big help, and it's not going to do it all. Or it's very unlikely that it will. But really, the whole path of practice that's there is meant to be practiced. It's meant to be walked. It's meant to be done. Even the end of these suttas, these teachings where someone realizes awakening at the end, one of the things that they often say is, I've done what needed to be done. It's a very interesting kind of saying, katang karaniyang. I've done what needed to be done. And so whether we're a householder or whether we're a monastic, the work of the heart that's there is really a human work. Because we don't, you know, we might look like angels when we shave our heads and put on robes, but we don't actually change into angels. And that becomes apparent quite quickly, actually, both for oneself and, yeah, it's not a bad thing, it's a very normal thing. It's normal to have these ideals, it's normal to have these expectations, and it's also normal to discover, and not wrong to discover, that we're actually still human, and that the work needs to be done, and that fortunately we have teachings that are there to then pick up and to use and to work with. And one of the nice things about monastic life is that it's 24/7, and so hopefully you're clear that it's not only when you go into the meditation hall, or that it's not only when you're dressed up wearing all your robes so nice, but, you know, really all the time. You're there for the whole time practice. But that's not exclusive to monastic life. Monastic life does not have a copyright on that. If someone enters into monastic life and then they're not working with the things whole time, then we feel like that's something a little odd, because we know the monastic life is meant to be whole time for who wishes to really give their whole life and whole energy to fully dedicate themselves to this work. Notice what I'm saying. Yeah? But no copyright is there. It's just for not being a monastic, for being a householder, or I'm hesitating to use the word layperson, and I'll tell you why. It's at your option. It's completely at your option how much you put these teachings into practice, or how much you use these practices, how much you expand on them in your life. I do know householder friends and Buddhist teachers who are really working also with whole life practice, or aiming for that, yeah? So it's just that it's completely at our option. This is part about the come and see part of the Buddha's teaching is, people are allowed to, try a little or try a lot or go at their own pace, go at their own speed, as much as they feel good to incorporate, to work with. The Buddha was very, very, very respectful of our own time and our own situations and our own path. And letting that be at your own will, at your own wish, how much you wish to do, how much you wish to give. In this case, giving time to the things of this path that are helpful and beneficial and important. Giving time to yourself, in a way, yeah. So it's completely at your option. There's no kind of requirement that's there. So, yeah, the other thing is, we also exist in this world. It can seem like the monastery is another world. People, when they're leaving the monastery, sometimes saying they're going back to the real world. I actually object to that kind of terminology. Monasteries, including Buddhist monasteries and even Buddhist monastics, actually exist in this real world together as human beings. And it's just that there are different ways that we can live life. And that's something that's very choiceful. None of us had to enter into monastic life. Nobody forced me to enter into monastic life. Only my own thinking. My own ideals, my own sense of need. That's the only thing that did. Yeah. So I really want to encourage you for your own, I'd say, well-grounded and realistic ideals, to think about how to live them in your life as fully as possible. Now, I'll mention why I was avoiding the word layperson. So when I grew up, a layperson, especially I was studying medicine, and a layperson compared to a doctor is a person who doesn't have medical training and doesn't have certification. They're a layperson because they don't know and they're not certified. Yeah? And so I learned layperson as having that kind of meaning. It's in comparison to those who know and those who are certified. But for monastics, you might say, okay, the monastics know and are certified, right? But the idea that the Buddha had from even before he began teaching about having what he called 4 assemblies or fourfold Sangha or fourfold community definitely explicitly included both householders and monastics. Who were called the disciples of the Buddha or the legitimate heirs of the Buddha. And the qualification was, whether a householder or a monastic, the qualifications were exactly the same in the text, in the sutta. Mahaparinibbana Sutta, it mentions exactly the same qualifications. That is to really to have understanding of this teaching and path, and also the experience, real experience in it, and then also to be able to share that with others. And if one encountered any kinds of wrong views or false views or people saying that the Buddha taught such and such when it's not actually what the teaching is, that they should be able to make that clear. So this is for everyone, including those who are the householder students or disciples of the Buddha, as well as the monastics. The words are exactly the same for each there. So for this part, it's like the criteria is the same. The monastics have formally taken on a dedication for anyone who's here that's completely open to you. But again, I would just encourage, really having the heart, the bravery, the courage, the kindness and love to yourself and to others to do as much as you can with this, as much as as much benefit as there can be for you in it. I wish that for you, and that's a completely an open field for you, and for our human world. The choices that each of us make and how we're living our lives, it's impactful on our own life and it's impactful on others. The choices that all of us are making, that is our culture. That is humanity, what it is to be human. So please don't discount the blessings or the benefits of really being true to our own hearts, doing the work that we need to do as much as we're able to, and seeing, how we feel called then to live in light of what we understand, in light of the insight and the wisdom that we've gained.
So would you say, sister, that Buddhism is a religion of mind training?
Could be said so. There are many different things that could be said.
It's a religion of mind training.
I hope that the people would train their minds. It depends on what you mean by Buddhism. It depends on what you mean by Buddhism. There's a broad cultural phenomena, and not everyone involved is necessarily training their mind. So that's one way of looking at it. On the other hand, if we look at what the Buddha taught, and we think about people taking up what the Buddha taught, then yes, they are training their minds.
In order to penetrate these teachings,
maybe Ayya Nirodha would like to say something about that.
What came to mind when I is what Buddha said, the mind is the forerunner.
Yes.
So if the mind is the forerunner, we have to start with the mind.
Yes. So I don't know if you could hear what Ayya Nirodha said, but this is the very wonderful first verses of the Dhammapada. So wonderful. Says mind is the forerunner, mind is the leader. And so yes, everything comes from that. From our mind comes our words, from our mind comes our actions, from our thoughts comes our sense of self, our relationships, our life, our world. Please contemplate and take a look at that. There's another verse that I memorized young in monastic life that's been very valuable to me, and this is a very short verse, and it says basically, mind is the cause of bondage and of liberation. Very valuable. Yeah. I realize it's getting late, or at least we've come to and we've surpassed the time that I know we talked about. So I just want to wish everyone well and encourage you to take a moment to pause and also to wish yourself well and share those well wishes with others who are here and out with others that you care about, and with the world at large, spreading out to everyone, and then back into your own hearts and bodies, and really feel those well wishes, and let what you do be informed by those genuine well wishes. So may.
retreat.
Look here.
And Venerable, did you have a story
Welcome
to
to
share?
the retreat and to the teaching.
This book, Illuminated by Love, that's here, I actually wrote one of the reflections inside here that I think it's called Heart of Gold or something like that, because Heart of Gold, I think. Is it called Gratitude? Oh, thank you very much. Maybe originally I called it Heart of Gold and the publisher called it Gratitude. I've known this teacher here for quite a while and participated in the retreats more than a few times, and the recollection that's in here comes from him having gifted a little heart of gold to me that I've kept as a reminder. Yeah, so he's arriving tomorrow evening in Sydney and going to be around leading retreat at Santi Forest Monastery. And some other teachings, and I'll let others let you know what those teachings are and when they are. Yeah. And if you have a chance to encourage him to come back to the United States sometime also, that would be nice.